Thanksgiving Day, what is its origin and why do we eat a turkey? Celebrated primarily in the United States and Canada, Thanksgiving has its roots in the early British settlers who arrived in North America and their difficult adaptation. In the United States and Canada, and to a lesser extent in other countries, the Christmas season is preceded by one of the most important celebrations of the year, Thanksgiving Day, a holiday with a strong family focus that revolves around food, with a dinner that can be as lavish as, or even more so than, Christmas dinner, and whose main course is a roasted turkey. What is the origin of this celebration? Why is it only celebrated in a few countries? And why is a turkey specifically eaten? The origin of Thanksgiving. To understand the origins of this celebration, we must go back to England immediately after the Anglican Reformation, carried out in 1534 by King Henry VIII. In his effort to separate the newly created church from the Roman tradition, many of the liturgical feasts that took place throughout the year were suppressed, mainly those dedicated to the saints. From almost 100 religious feasts a year, the number was reduced to fewer than 30. Instead, a new type of celebration was established, called, precisely, Thanksgiving Day. It was not a recurring holiday, but rather proclaimed in response to certain events considered signs of divine grace, a good harvest, the end of a drought, famine, or epidemic, and even a military victory over an enemy nation. Furthermore, although its purpose was to give thanks to God, these were not strictly religious holidays and could be proclaimed, in fact, they often were, by secular authorities. There could be several Thanksgivings throughout the year, and although they didn't have a fixed date, there was usually at least one in the fall to celebrate the end of the harvest, if it had been good. This is the origin of what would eventually become the modern Thanksgiving. 4 origins for one party. Traditionally, the first official Thanksgiving is considered to be the one celebrated in Plymouth, Massachusetts, in the fall of 1621, although there is evidence that it had been celebrated previously in other places, such as Virginia. That year, the English colonists of Plymouth held a feast to celebrate the harvest after a particularly difficult year. For the occasion, they also invited members of the Wampanoag tribe, who had provided them with food to survive the previous winter in exchange for their help against a rival tribe, the Narragansett. This is why that Thanksgiving was taken as the benchmark, overshadowing earlier ones, as it symbolized a moment of brotherhood between colonists and natives that would rarely occur in subsequent centuries. In 1789, George Washington elevated Thanksgiving to a national holiday and fixed it on the calendar as the 4th Thursday of November. Even so, Virginia never stopped considering itself the birthplace of this celebration, to the point that in 1963 President John F. Kennedy made an official proclamation recognizing both states as pioneers of the holiday. But these aren't the only possibilities, as 2 other hypotheses point to alternative and even older origins for Thanksgiving. One of these hypotheses places it in Canada, which, along with the United States, is the country where this celebration is most important. It supposedly took place in 1578 during an expedition led by the English privateer Martin Frobisher, who was trying to cross from the Atlantic to the Pacific through the Northwest Passage, in the north of the American continent. However, there is no evidence that Thanksgiving was celebrated in Canada before the 17th century. In fact, this country has only officially celebrated it since 1879, and the date is different, the second Monday of October. The second alternative hypothesis places the first Thanksgiving much further south, in Florida. Some historians specifically, from Florida identify this celebration with a harvest banquet organized in 1565 by the Spanish garrison of St. Augustine. However, other scholars debate whether this could truly be considered a Thanksgiving celebration, as that holiday originated specifically within the context of the Anglican Reformation. In more modern times, the Thanksgiving celebration has spread to other countries, primarily those that were once American colonies or protectorates, such as the Philippines and some Caribbean islands. It is also celebrated in countries with a Protestant presence, particularly in the Dutch city of Leiden, from which many of the colonists who migrated to Plymouth and participated in the feast considered the first Thanksgiving originated. Why do we eat, and forgive, a turkey? Aside from the debate about which place can claim the title of pioneer of Thanksgiving, another question is why turkey is the star dish of this celebration and where the tradition of pardoning a turkey, carried out by U.S. presidents, comes from. The answer to the first question is quite pragmatic. When it came to holding a feast, it was practically preferable to sacrifice a bird rather than a cow or a pig, since birds reproduce faster and are less expensive to raise. Due to the precarious conditions in which American colonists lived, ranchers often preferred raising poultry to cattle. And if a bird had to be sacrificed, turkeys have more meat than chickens or ducks, so more people could be fed while losing the fewest animals. As for the tradition of sparing a turkey's life, it arose out of simple necessity. In the late 19th century, American farmers began gifting their turkeys to the president, which eventually led to a sort of competition to see which one he would choose for the official Thanksgiving dinner. The rest were given to White House staff or returned to the farm. Of course, for them, the pardon was only temporary. The presidential pardon itself was actually the brainchild of a woman, Eleanor Rosalind Carter, wife of Jimmy Carter and First Lady from 1977 to 1981. Known for her activism in support of mental health, during her husband's presidency she arranged for some of the turkeys that weren't selected to be sent to petting zoos where visitors could interact with animals for therapeutic purposes. Other presidents had spontaneously pardoned some turkeys, but from then on it became a tradition. The subsequent administration, under Ronald Reagan, formalized it as a public ceremony. Even so, the life of these animals is not usually much longer, since the breed preferred by American turkey breeders, broad-breasted white, is very prone to obesity and respiratory problems. Most do not live more than a year after receiving a pardon, although they can live 2 or 3.